Hello and welcome back to Comics Over Time. This season, which we're calling Murdock and Marvel, a history of Marvel Comics starring Daredevil, we're breaking down the year in the comic book industry in two parts. In part one, we'll look at the state of the comic book industry as a whole, as well as what things were going on in society that may have impacted the comic book industry during that year. We'll talk big picture about what's going on at DC and independent comics, then we'll shift our focus to Marvel. We'll look at who is creating comics, what new characters or storylines were introduced, and which comics debuted or ended. In part 2, we'll dive deep into Marvel's longest-running characters, Matt Murdock. We'll look at what the year had in store for the Man Without Fear, key things that happened, and who joined or left his world before spotlighting one key issue or story. From there, we'll wrap up the year's discussion with a takeaway before moving on to another year and a whole new discussion. We're excited to have you join us on a trip through comic book history. We are back with another new year. It is 2016, and the format is changing a little bit. My name is Dwayne, and with me, as always, is my good buddy Dan. Dan, how you doing?
Really doing well. Excited to be back and nearing the modern age in comics and in Daredevil. So, like you said, time to redo things a little bit.
Yes, we are, as we mentioned with 2015, that is going to be our last full deep dive look at the year in comics and the year at Marvel. We're going to do a lighter, quick hit version of those things, and we're going to just basically get all of 2016 into one year. So you're going to get a little bit of a look at the year in comics, and then we're going to talk Daredevil, and then we're going to talk a little bit of takeaway, talking about what's going on at Marvel as the takeaway for this week. So, little new format, and forgive us if there's a little bump along the way, but I think it'll be good because, yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on, and we have an entirely new volume of Daredevil that we're going to be looking at this week, and yeah, things have changed. Things have changed a lot.
Yep. That's kind of the way it is with the whole comic world in some ways. It's an interesting place right now, so we got a lot to talk about. All right, and so just as a note, because we are now trying to do this in one episode, and we're not doing necessarily the whole year in comics, because I just don't feel comfortable enough about being able to do what I would call a history of stuff that's within the last 10 years. We're just going to talk a little bit about what was going on. And so this year, if you want to just do a quick umbrella sentence or two on comics, it was a mostly uneventful year in terms of the industry. Not a lot was going on with big new publishers or publishers folding or anything like that. Sales were largely stagnant. DC did a little better than they'd maybe done in previous years. The Loot Crate thing is still out there making things weird. But in terms of the two big companies themselves, both Marvel and DC are coming out of years in 2015 where they basically blew up their universes. And now 2016 is where we see what they're going to make out of this new resurrected universe. Right? So It's a very big year in terms of setting the stage for the next decade or 2 decades, etc., of the DC and Marvel universes.
The year in comics. Okay, Dan, if we're doing a quick hit of the year at comics, since it's kind of a stagnant year, nothing too seismic, but we do have this shift that happened because DC and Marvel blew up their universe. Where do we begin? What are we looking at?
We normally start with movies and TV. So, again, I'm not going to spend all the time I did before on this. We're not going to go over box office dollars and everything, especially because a lot of these now, basically, you just assume they all print money for the next few years.
Yes,
right?
They do,
so,
yes.
In terms of movies that came out from Marvel and DC this year, we've got Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice. We've got Suicide Squad. We've got Captain America Civil War. There's Deadpool, Doctor Strange, X-Men Apocalypse. All came out this year. As well as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows, which is another one of the Turtles franchise movies. Interestingly, there were no major, at least that I could tell, comic book adaptation movies that were not Marvel and DC. Kind of like happened in comics in the late 70s and 80s. Everybody else has just given up and all the money just goes to Marvel and DC on this.
Sure. So the Suicide Squad, that's the Will Smith one, right?
Yep, that's the original
Yes.
one.
Yes. Yep. Okay.
Not entirely well received, but it did make some money.
No, it did. Yeah, it definitely did make some money. There's some great Marvel movies in here. I mean, Civil Wars. I even like Doctor Strange and Deadpool. Obviously, that kicked off what ended up being a really big franchise as well.
Yep. And in essence, it's 2 Sony movies, 2 Marvel movies, and 2 DC movies this year.
Yes.
So, which is what we've kind of had for a while before Marvel really started steamrolling things. On TV, a couple of things to note. The first is that the Arrowverse had one of its first big crossover events. Supergirl has joined the universe. You've got Legends running through time and all this other stuff. And they had actually what they called the Invasion event, which actually was kind of based off some stuff from a Legion story way back in the day, and then also a DC crossover from back in the 90s. But this was interesting because it really was like comics come to life. You've got a big blockbuster summer crossover, only it's in television form, where it was over the course of many nights across different TV shows. So that was a lot of fun. And then also DC came out with a new TV show, animated show called DC Superhero Girls, Superhero High, which is one of the first sort of superhero shows that had been directly marketed towards girls in ages. It came out, it had like a Lego line of toys with it, all this other sort of stuff, other things. So that's pretty cool. In terms of comics themselves, like I noted, sales were essentially flat. Well, 580 million, which is right around where they were previously. Graphic novel sales actually went up a bit, and comic sales went down a bit, but it kind of washed out between them. That said, there were some real highs. Diamond actually shipped 10 million comics in a month for the first time ever this year. A book called Big Trouble in Little China was another one of those Loot Crate books that moved 421,000 copies. And the top 11 books were all #1 issues, including everything from Big Trouble in Little China to Civil War II, Harley Quinn, Champions, DC Universe Rebirth, Batman, All-Star Batman, Black Panther, Suicide Squad, and Batman Rebirth. And in fact, 16 of the top 20 titles, individual selling titles for the year, were #1 issues. So it was one of those years where there was a new #1 coming out constantly, and a lot of them were very popular. We'll talk in a while about some of the Marvel ones more specifically. But overall, questions?
No, that makes, I guess, if you blow up the universe and start over, there's going to be lots of #1s that are going to be in the market. And so I guess that really doesn't surprise me that 16 of the top 20 ended up being #1.
No, it does make some sense. And then in terms of comic news, we usually talk a little bit about what's going on in the industry. Again, the DC Universe recovering from the fact that Dr. Manhattan actually sort of destroyed and remade the whole thing in the Rebirth event. When this happened, characters like Wally West came back. We got an old Superman that came back. And oddly, you at that point had sort of like pre-New 52 Superman and post-New 52 Superman, both running around in the DC Universe at the same time. Wally West had actually been replaced by a new character, a Black Wally West, which sort of jibed better with the character that was shown in the Arrowverse show. But now the old, sort of Archie Andrews-looking Wally West from the 50s through the 80s came back. So you've got 2 Wally Wests. They kept both of them, even though they're the same guy. The universe got really crazy for a while. Eventually, they killed off one of the Superman and stuff like this, so things kind of got sorted out. But it was a weird universe for a while. DC also launched a new line called Young Animal, which was sort of curated by Gerard Way of My Chemical Romance, who's done a lot of comic stuff, and he was sort of the overall editor and guiding light for that line. Had books like Doom Patrol, Shade the Changing Man, a lot of the stuff that had been some of DC's trippier books in the past came back in that line. Sort of intended to be sort of this hip, more youth-oriented kind of comic line. DC also rebooted some Hanna-Barbera titles and brought back like the Flintstones and a book called Scooby Apocalypse, which was a heck of a lot of fun actually. It's like the Scooby Gang in a post-apocalyptic sort of landscape. So
really,
yeah, that was all of
that
these were
weird.
deeply weird and cynical. The Flintstones book is incredibly subversive. There's a Snagglepuss book that's going to come out that is incredibly subversive, but it's really good stuff. So, Shelley Bond left Vertigo this year, which was huge. She'd been the editor that had sort of put a lot of the stamp on the best Vertigo titles, and in fact, in many ways, Vertigo was Shelley Bond. So that was a huge hit for Vertigo. And just because this has to happen now every year, but we start seeing it. I don't know we'd seen a lot of this. We actually had a writer named Chelsea Kane who'd been writing Marvel books. She left Twitter this year completely due to online harassment. What's interesting is she'd been a writer of novels and other stuff for years, had been on and active and vocal on Twitter for a long time. And according to her, she's like, I never really had this sort of problem until I started writing comics. And then
right.
The comics quote unquote fandom is just really toxic at times, especially to women, and especially in the age of Trump. And so as this was coming along, we're starting to see this more, but this was one of the first sort of canary in the coal mines in terms of that sort of thing.
Oof, that's rough. It looks like we had some notable passings in 2016.
Yeah, and I mean, one of them, Jack Davis, died at like 91 years old. He was one of the old guard of Mad Magazine. But we had a couple that died way too young. Darwin Cook from Catwoman, The Spirit, New Frontier, the Parker books that have been winning essentially, Eisner's every year recently, passed of cancer. I think he was in his late 40s or early 50s. And then Steve Dillon, who'd done a bunch of work on Preacher and Punisher, that sort of stuff, also was way too young to die. So we lost a couple of folks, really, really talented creators, young. There's also a number of other people who probably don't have time to list. But yeah, unfortunate. Cook passing really hit me hard because he absolutely is one of my all-time favorite creators, and he was in the prime of his life.
So let's move on. Let's talk about what's going on at Marvel this year. You have a few notes on some new characters that showed up this year. One of them, really, really big character, I think.
Yeah, there's actually a number of them that they're starting to bring in now. And this, we just saw the reboot of the universe. And what's weird about this is, I reread some of this, but we'd had some rifts in the universe caused by time travel weirdness, and essentially probably was all Doctor Doom's fault in the end because of his time travel platforms. But the universe started to fall apart. They tried to save it. It collapsed entirely. And at the end of that collapse, we were left with essentially two universes, the original Ultimates universe and the 616 universe, crashing towards each other. In order to try and stop a complete destruction, what essentially happened is Doctor Strange and Doctor Doom, if you remember, went out to the edge of the galaxy, got some cosmic power. Doctor Doom becomes a god. He makes his own weird sort of world. And then once he's done that, he creates this battle world and gives everybody from different sort of Marvel realities fiefdoms, essentially. Well, Reed Richards had found a way to put himself in this little bubble ship, came down, as usual, took care of Doom, and then essentially the Molecule Man helped him sort of just reset the universes. Well, as part of that, we have some changes now. And one of those changes is that there's some new characters coming in and some new histories. Iron Man specifically, his history changed a lot. So he gives up being the regular Iron Man. A new character called Riri Williams comes in, who's going to become Ironheart. She's going to take over. We'll see that there's a bunch of other things because essentially she takes over as the Invincible Iron Man. Doc Doom becomes the infamous Iron Man. And Iron Man himself goes off and becomes sort of like some secret agent type guy for a while. It's a little bit unusual. We also had a new character, Nadia Van Dyne, who's going to be a new Wasp. The Champions come back as a new team with Kamala Khan, um, Miles Morales, Amadeus Cho, a bunch of the other younger heroes. So it's kind of like a Young Avengers. Captain America, it turns out this is the year where we find out that Captain America, in the new reality, is and always has been a Hydra plant.
Oh
ever
my
since,
goodness.
like World War II or whatever. And this was not received well at all.
I can't imagine that this would have been. I mean, not being somebody that read Captain America, I knew exactly what you were talking about because it was such a big deal. I remember people talking about that.
We had the Hulk and War Machine killed during the Civil War event, which was interesting because it was about what they call predictive policing. There was a character called Ulysses, a mutant, who could essentially predict when people were going to commit crimes. And so the question was, well, do we take advantage of that and make sure people don't commit crimes? Or do we understand that putting people in prison for the fact you think they might is not a good thing? Yeah, I noticed that too. Sigh. Other than that, Peter Parker gets rich and becomes sort of like a new Tony Stark as an industrialist. And for number ones that I thought were pretty interesting this year, we had Jessica Jones, the Black Panther, New Year Vows, Vote Loki, right in the middle of a U.S. election. Loki started running for president. Civil War II, Champions, Guardians of Infinity, The Vision, Power Man and Iron Fist, and of course Daredevil gets rebooted.
Quite a few number ones. Imagine that.
Yep.
All right, so let's look at the Eisners real quick. What are some of these standouts that got awards for their work in 2016?
So I've pared this down as well, but Saga, as usual, wins for Best Continuing Series. Vaughn and Staples have been dominating on that. Best Limited Series was The Vision by Tom King and Gabriel Walta. This actually is my pick for the best comic of the year, or my favorite comic of the year. I really enjoyed this story. Best New Series, Black Hammer. Best Publication for Kids was Ghosts by Raina Tegelmeier. Best Writer was Brian K. Vaughan for Paper Girls and Saga. Best Penciler Inker was Fiona Staples for Saga. Colorist, we got Matt Wilson, who's also on Paper Girls and some things like that. Best Letterer, Tom Klein, comes back and reclaims his title. Best Comics-related periodical. The AV Club Comics coverage actually wins this year.
Wow.
Yeah. Best Comic-related book, Crazy, George Harriman, A Life in Black and White. It was really good. I love that book. Highly recommend it. And Best Academic Scholarly work, Superwomen, Gender, Power, and Representation by Carolyn Coca. Also really good and sort of a key early work on something that's become really big academically around comics.
Looks like we had some Hall of Famers that got voted in this year as well as some judges' choices.
Yeah, so the judges' choices are the ones that usually are used to sort of highlight people who have been important to the industry, but everybody wouldn't necessarily know. And then the voters' choices are voted in by the voice of the people, essentially. You could not have a more distinct showing
right.
of what the differences between these are than you did in 2016. The voters' choice is Gilbert and Jamie Hernandez of Love and Rockets fame, two of the most beloved creators of the sort of alternative and small press. George Perez, one of my favorite artists of all time. Mm-hmm. Dwayne hates George Perez.
No, don't say that. Do not say that. I just don't. I have not found the George Perez book that I've enjoyed right as much as. Yes, I haven't found the right one for me.
I loved his Avengers and Titans and all this sort of stuff. Walt Simonson, of course, with his Thor and everything else. Jim Starlin, all the Marvel Cosmic stuff. So those guys went in for the voters' choices. And then the judges' choices were Milt Gross, who is a early 20th century cartoonist. H.G. Peter, who was the original artist and co-creator artist on Wonder Woman. Very rarely is actually noted because he didn't actually get credit for it initially. Antonio Prajas was a Cuban refugee who came over and created Spy vs. Spy for Mad Magazine. I don't know if you remember any of those. You've got the black and white spies that are constantly.
I do remember those, yes.
And then Dori Seda, who is a cartoonist who worked in the underground both as someone who was in sort of the last gasp production area and the like, but then also did a bunch of comics as well after she got into the industry, and has been very influential there as well. She died early, and so there's a number of awards already named after her and things like that as well.
All right, that is quite a list. I think that's all the time that we have for discussing comics. Let's jump in and let's talk about what was going on with Daredevil in 2016.
Right. And everybody out there, dear readers, if you think I spent too much time on any particular thing, could pare it back, let me know. Or if you're like, no, that's right. I would like to kind of know what you think of the new format of the comic year in review.
The year in Daredevil.
All right, Dwayne. So that is the week in. All right, Dwayne. That is the year in comics. So time to move on to our favorite superhero. I shouldn't actually say that. Moon Knight's going to be jealous. But in any case, our featured superhero. What was going on with Daredevil in 2016?
You know, Daredevil still has sort of this kind of abbreviated appearance list this year. Again, we've got a new volume 5, and a new creative team. And things are actually quite a bit different than they were when we last left our man Matt Murdock and Daredevil on the West Coast with Mark Waid and Chris Samney. But beyond that, we're looking at the first 12 issues of Volume 5. But in addition to that, Daredevil and the Punisher had something called Seventh Circle that had 3 issues. There's a True Believers Daredevil Practice to Deceive #1, a Daredevil Annual #1. He was in Secret Wars 2 #1, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. #5, Mockingbird #5, something called Accused #1, Captain America Steve Rogers #5, and Civil War 2 #5. He's in a lot of #5 issues this year, just happenstance. As far as the creative team goes, the writer is Charles Soule, who you mentioned as I believe he got a Rookie of the Year just last year in 2015. He moves over and takes on Daredevil, and is going to be doing it for basically the entire run of Volume 5. And with him doing art, we have a couple of different artists. We have Ron Garney, Goran Sudzuka, and Matteo Buffagni. And each of those artists also did their own inking. So whatever book they did the art on, they also inked. So it's sort of interesting. Like, we've been seeing previously, it seemed like we were seeing a lot where somebody would do art and somebody else would do the inks. And that seemed to be the thing for a while, but now it seems to be going back with Chris Samney and some of the people even before before Volume 5, that if they were doing the pencils, they're also doing the inks.
Yeah, and it is unusual to have this many people who are doing their own inking, to be quite frank. This is not necessarily normal. I will note that a lot of these have sort of foreign European names, and the European artists do seem to be way more likely to work in that full art style, because it's less common, I believe, in Europe for the sort of assembly line version of comic books. Kind of like everything else, they are more individualistic a little bit in the way that they do some of these things. So I don't believe that having an inker is as common over there as it is. So some of these folks are coming over and working in the States from previously working in Italian books or whatever. Maybe that's the reason why they're used to doing their own.
That makes some sense. So, like, as far as the year goes, you could basically sum it up as new suit, new city job, new sidekick, but same old Matt problems. Because the year kicks off with just an entirely new status quo. We talked about Samuel Chung and being introduced in that one shot, or in that single issue at the end of 2015. He's now back. He is
Yep.
Blind Spot, and he is a protege, or he's looking for a mentor figure who's been doing, fighting crime and stuff, and he kind of wants to model what Matt Murdock's been doing to Hell's Kitchen. He wants to do for Chinatown.
Yep. Exactly.
And so, but Samuel Chung's an undocumented immigrant, and he's smart, really smart. He's created this invisibility suit that's powered by batteries, like regular, like C or D batteries or something. Mm-hmm. And so he can go invisible for short periods of time.
Yes. And then he has to go and find more batteries.
And then he has to go find more batteries, yeah. Which inconvenient at times, I imagine. So Matt is training him, and he's pushing him, and he seems like he might be a little over his head when it comes to being a mentor, if I'm being perfectly honest. Like, I don't know. It just sort of like, okay, sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think, he's ever done anything like that. And, it's weird because Batman also lives in much the same world with the crazy villains and the Inhumanes and whatever. So when you think about the fact that, Batman has Robin, this isn't any worse than that. But nonetheless, neither of them is really technically somebody who's got any training as a teacher or whatever. So it's weird that he would do this. But yeah, the guy has basically, been going around and looking for other superheroes or established superheroes who have a set of skills that he would be able to emulate. He's like, I think Daredevil's the guy. And so he kind of initiated it. And yeah, it's been interesting.
Yeah, I think he also liked the idea, or wanted to emulate the whole idea of Daredevil being kind of the guy that Hell's Kitchen looks to help deal with. Yeah, so there's that. But also, so obviously Matt's back in New York, which is a complete change from him being in San Francisco for the last couple of years. But here's the big thing. Somehow he has regained his secret identity. We don't know how. We don't know why. But he is now, nobody seems to know that Matt Murdock and Daredevil are one and the same.
With one exception.
With one exception. And it is Foggy Nelson. Surprise, surprise. The one guy who seemingly was one of the last to know ends up being the only guy that still knows. And the other thing is Daredevil's not talking about how this happened. We have no idea how this happened. The other thing is he's in an entirely different new suit. He's not in the red suit that he was in before. He is in an all black suit with red sort of trim, red boots, a red DD on the chest, red belt, that sort of thing. So some red accents, but it is black, which is kind of cool. Like he's had, I was thinking back to the 90s when he had like that full kind of body armor sort of thing going on. I think that was kind of a dark, almost black, if not black, suit. So he does have this in his history. It's been a little while, and
it's been a long while.
It has. And one last thing is, because apparently nobody knows that Matt Murdock and Daredevil are one and the same, he's now back being able to practice law again. He is now back available to practice law, that he's got his bar license reinstated. But rather than defending, being a defendant, he is a prosecutor for the district attorney's office.
Yep.
So he is, which is, I think, more fitting, because like if you're, basically doing vigilante work at night, it seems only right that you would be, prosecuting those same people during the day, I guess.
Yeah, it's interesting. I am I'm not exactly sure how I feel about any of this. It is the standard. Like the fact that he was a person who was essentially getting people off potentially from, he had to defend them even if they were guilty as a lawyer, but he was doing the vigilante thing to bring them in. It was interesting, but it was unusual. And really, most of the time, if any of the heroes are doing in this sort of stuff, they are more district attorney type things and the Harvey Dent sort of. Although Harvey Dent's the other way, I guess. So it's kind of crazy. But yeah, the whole idea about the art and the like, I think it was around Daredevil 330 or 340 that we had the art the previous time, and so we'll see how this goes and how they deal with it. But it's been intriguing.
So that's the new status quo as we find out very early on, kind of in the first book, and as part of the first big story arc of Volume 5, we have this saga involving a sort of cult leader, I want to say, called Ten Fingers, who is centered around Chinatown, who, yes, literally has 10 fingers on each hand. It is crazy looking at the artwork for this.
Yes.
Now he's stolen power from the hand. His followers think he's some kind of holy savior, and Blindspot's mother is way in deep with this cult. She's like one of his right hand women or something, and it is weird because like they're going by like the number of fingers on their hands, and so like if they do good, they actually get fingers taken away from their hands.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense,
like
but it is something like that. So
yeah.
With Blindspot's mother in with this cult, it's dragged Blindspot into this conflict, whether he wants it to be or not. This whole thing kind of spirals into this massive church showdown that ends up with the hand and then this giant beast on behalf of the hand showing up to try and wipe 10 fingers off the map. It is
yes.
it is literally just fight, and then they like catch their breath, and then suddenly there's another big fight in their like compound thing. It's crazy. Blindspot gets injured, but he gets a harsh lesson in what Daredevil's world really does look like. And so he starts to get to see just what being a vigilante and kind of dealing with a cult leader or villain in your part of New York, what that ends up looking like.
Yep. It's also a really interesting story though too. And I mean it in many ways I think has as much or more relevance today as it did like 9 years ago or whatever. You know, that America's been trying to process this whole idea of undocumented aliens and the like for a long time. And this is a story where you really do have people who, because of the fact they are essentially locked out of a lot of the other systems of American justice, and they are in many cases unable to work through those systems, somebody like Ten Fingers can take advantage of that. Yeah. And can work through that, and can even in many cases make it seem like they are doing good. I mean, it reminds me almost of The Godfather, you know, that when they're at the wedding and you've got all of these people coming and they're like, you know, I thought that the law would protect me, but it didn't, and now I'm coming to you, Godfather, right? That's essentially how a lot of these people get into this cult, I believe, is that they don't have anywhere else to go, they need protection, and then it seems like he's providing that. But of course, there are other things going on that people don't necessarily know about. But it's really interesting, and of course the fact that we've got a lead character as well, who is somebody who is illegal. You know, Blindspot and his entire sort of story arc, how he even ends up needing to work with Murdock the way he does, all comes out of that fact that he's undocumented. And that's sort of, I love the fact that Soule has made a character whose story really is developed through that thesis of you start with this this situation they're in, and
Right.
then that leads to all the other things that occur. So
Yeah.
it's very cool. But yeah, it's extremely topical even today, actually.
Yeah. I really liked the artwork on it. It looks very, very, very different than what we've seen previously with Chris Samney. I think Ron Garney did a really good job. Like, you could look, it could look weird seeing a villain with 10 fingers on each hand. And it did look weird, but it didn't look like so ridiculous. Like, I was sort of expecting it to be super ridiculous, but it was. And then just like the way the story is being told, and there's very, very much like everything has this Chinese look to it across these books too, that I thought really looked good.
Stylized in a lot of ways, and a lot of it,
Yeah,
the colors are more muted. It is a very like second level sort of artistic appreciation where this is not as pretty as a lot of the art that we've seen previously.
I'm going to tell you, I think my appreciation for art is maturing as we've been reading through comics. Like before, initially, like when we were reading Moon Knight, I definitely think I gravitated towards things that were, you know, hyper realistic and things like that. But now I'm definitely seeing other art styles and appreciating some of the other art styles that maybe I wasn't appreciating as much previously.
Because this is very abstracted. There's not a lot of detail. It reminds me a lot of what Eduardo Rizzo was doing on 100 Bullets. It reminds me in some ways of kind of the way that Frank Miller did a lot of his finishes. Like, you can see, I think, a lot of Miller and a lot of Klaus Johnson in this.
Yeah,
like especially
I loved those two, so that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, but it is. I was not as sold on it at first, but I liked the fact that it was very consistent with what he did. Like you said, with the hands and everything. I mean, it was really easy to follow the story, and it was well done. So
yeah,
I'm not sure I really loved the color choices, because in many cases it was very muted, to where you just saw like something that's almost gray, and then just Daredevil's belt and the D's were the only like this bright red in the whole thing. So it was in his eyes were red now.
There's definitely something to that. Yeah.
But overall, yeah, this was. What did you think of what happened to Ten Fingers? That was kind of gross. He was like hung up on a wall or something like this.
Yeah.
Not good.
It was
not good.
not. No.
So there were some gory things in it too. It was not easy reading.
No. But we follow that up with a 2-issue story called Electric Connections. And we get with that the return of Elektra. First, she shows up in Matt's courtroom during trial, then asks to meet with Daredevil, another person that doesn't realize Daredevil and Matt Murdock are one and the same. When she does finally get to meet up with Daredevil, she attacks him. Blind Spot tries to jump in to save Daredevil, but Elektra breaks his arm. I think we're sensing a theme with our man Blind Spot, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Turns out Elektra's convinced she has a daughter who has gone missing and that Daredevil is involved. Unfortunately, it turns out that this was a trick, and after finally convincing her that the evidence that she has been given wasn't real, she approaches the man that gave it to her, and he breaks the planted memory with the phrase, "the tangled web we weave." Elektra is relieved she won't be corrupting a child, but is angry at the person who deceived her. And we don't really know at the end of this 2-story arc who it was that actually did this.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I mean, it's cool to see Elektra again.
Yes.
Because it had been a while. I don't know if during the Wade run she appeared at all.
I don't think so.
I don't think we saw her at all during that. There was a few in and out kind of things here and there in the previous years, but for a long time, Elektra has not been a big part of the storyline. It's also weird that we've got another implanted child memory because that was, if you remember, back in the Kevin Smith days, there was something about the whole,
Yeah.
you know,
The with Karen.
yeah, and so that was a weird one as well. I will. What did you think of the art in this? Buffagni's art, because 6 and 7 are both done by the same guy.
Yes. I don't know that I loved it as much as the first story arc, but it was still really really solid, and I liked some of the actions panels that we saw with Daredevil and Elektra fighting.
Yeah, this is the issue where the coloring really started to get to me. I think for one story, it being just monochromatic almost, like it's got a sepia filter on it, is one thing, but I just started to be like, there's just an awful lot of gray in these books, and I'm not sure if I really enjoyed it as much. Maybe this is just coming off of a couple years of the bright lights. I had trouble adjusting. I'm not sure, but yeah, it was a little strange. So
Sure.
Story was kind of cool.
Yeah, the story. I mean, I have a little bit of a tough time anytime the story revolves around a child, whether or not the child is real or fictional in this case, just because of the potential issues with child violence and stuff. I'm not a big fan of that, but I will say this. The next story that we get that Goran Sudzuka did definitely did not feel like these first two. And it felt a little bit more like the Chris Samney, a little lighter, a little bit brighter than we've seen in these first two stories.
Yep. Yeah, the Elektra one is weird too because of that whole idea that somehow she was just sort of manipulated to come in and attack, and then it just sort of ends. Like we don't really get. Well, we don't really get
It is. She goes and confronts the guy that said, "Hey, your daughter got taken. Here's the proof on this phone," and he like uses. It was almost like she was hypnotized, and then he broke it by saying, "The tangled web we weave."
Yeah.
And he's like, "I don't know who. I was just told. I was just given money and told to do this, and so I did it."
And I can't remember. You've read ahead a little bit. Does this come back anytime soon?
We Daredevil figures out who it is, and he tells her, and she goes off and presumably enacts justice.
It's basically giving a death sentence to that person, I would assume, by telling that name.
I would imagine it would not be good for them. Yeah.
Alrighty, good enough. Well, we'll wait to hear that. Then I have not reread these in a long time, so I didn't even remember what had happened there. So
right,
good.
So then we get the Blind Man's Bluff story arc that features a team up with Spider-Man outside the U.S. As a matter of fact, Matt is poised as a Frenchman playing Texas Hold'em in a tournament in China, and intends to rob someone at a casino, which is as fun as it sounds. And so for that is going to be our spotlight for this week. It is absolutely just fantastic.
It's Casino Royale, essentially.
Yes, it definitely has some feel to that, and I'm here for it.
Yeah, this one was a lot of fun.
And finally, the year ends with the start of a terrifying dark art story that starts with the discovery of a full wall mural made from human blood. Now, we're going to hold off on talking about this until 2017 so we can discuss the story in its entirety. But if you've watched season 1 of Daredevil Born Again, you might have an idea of just who Daredevil and Blind Spot are dealing with.
Or you might not, because the plot was dealt with in such a weird way that you may have actually missed it. Who knows? So.
Yes, it was more of a fleeting thing, but yeah, you did kind of figure it out.
Kind of.
Yeah.
So, yep.
But
Alrighty then.
So that's the first year of Charles Soule's run on Daredevil, the first year of Daredevil volume number 5. And yeah, I found myself like into it. Like it didn't take me, like I remember kind of being wary, I guess, or like not really getting into the Mark Waid run when he took over and needing some books to really get into it. I didn't necessarily have that same problem here.
Well, this took you back to, I mean, literally, this is one of those just pulls the Band-Aids off and brings you back to what you knew, really.
Yeah.
You know, the costume's a little different. There's a new character here and there. But this is a very recognizable Daredevil to anybody who's read Daredevil in the 80s or 90s, you know? If you're a Frank Miller Daredevil fan, this makes sense. And Charles Soule is a fantastic writer. So the stories, they move well, and the characters are interesting. There's banter. I loved when the kid was starting, where he's like, I don't necessarily have powers, but Iron Man doesn't have powers. He's just got the suit.
Because exactly the same. Yes.
When Daredevil said something along the lines of, well, you could drop him in the Sahara Desert, and he'd like build a helicopter and fly out from stuff he found laying around in the sand.
It was like cactus needles or something.
Yeah. It's not his suit that makes him a superhero,
Right.
So it's his mind. So the kid is learning, but I like some of the banter between them. I like the ideas in it. This is just a really solid story, and as much as some of the art, I really enjoyed what we had for art in the last year or two. This fits these stories fantastically, and it really does have a cool atmospheric sort of thing to it. I don't know that you almost have to give kudos to the editors, because I think they found artists who really complemented the sort of story that Soule was trying to tell.
Yeah.
Chris Samney, for all we love him, probably would not have been a great choice for this storyline.
Yeah. That is true. All right, Dan, should we jump in and talk about the Spotlight?
All right, bring it on.
This week's Spotlight story.
Dwayne, my man, you have chosen for our Spotlight not one, but 2 books from late 2016. Both Daredevil Volume 5, Issue 8 and 9. A story called Blind Man's Bluff. What was it you liked about this? And tell us a little about the story.
Well, as you stated, this is Casino Royale, Marvel and Daredevil style, which is absolutely fantastic. The idea that Matt can play Texas Hold'em in a card tournament, like a $100,000 card tournament sort of thing, is actually just seems crazy to me. But it also sort of worked. It reminded me a little bit of like Ocean's 11 or something, that sort of thing as well. And so and then getting Spider-Man 2 on top of that, it's just great. So the story kicks off with Matt Murdock operating under what I think is that old alias from way, way back at the end of Volume 1. Lorette Lavasseur. That sounds right. I can't remember. There was that short 5 or 6 book arc where they had like
ran off to France,
and he went overseas because he was trying to infiltrate and stop like some information about agents getting out or something like that. Whatever. But so he's slipping into a high stakes poker tournament at the luxurious Sans Macao Casino in Macau. But Matt's not entirely there for the jackpot. He's after something far more dangerous, an attaché case sitting in a heavily guarded penthouse level, rumored to hold intel that could expose crime syndicates around the world. Of course, poker, when you're blind, seems like a losing proposition, unless, of course, you're Matt Murdock. Matt can't read his own cards due to the glossy finish to prevent wear on the cards, but he can read every micro twitch, shifts in breathing, slight flutter of someone's heartbeat, basically every tell that most players have, no matter how subtle, and Matt can use it to ambush them, and he does so all the way to the final table. But the real twist comes at that final table, and a character by the name of Alexander Apex. He's a telepath hired by the casino to win back all the prize money, or at least that's what we're led to believe. And that's what, because Daredevil's talking to a woman about his, his poker tournament so far, and is talking about this. Apex's power is simple and terrifying. He sees players' cards by reading their minds. Plain and simple. So he knows what everybody has in their hand at all times. Except you can't read the mind of a man who literally can't see his own cards. So Apex now is suddenly blind in all the ways that matter, and Matt ends up playing him like a violin, going all in and taking Apex to the cleaners and winning the tournament. Absolutely, just and that's like most of that first book is just this, and I absolutely loved it. It was just so great because you're like, how is he going to do this? Because it makes no sense. You have a blind man, and he's talking about normally I would just use my fingers and feel the card and know what was there, but they have stuff on the cards to ensure that you can't read them like that. Nope. Because then you could count cards and whatnot. And so what is he going to do? Of course, he's going to, using the senses and stuff, he's going to catch all those little tells that everybody has when they get a good hand or when they get a bad hand. And he's going around saying, this guy's going to do this. This woman's going to do that. And it's great.
Yep. I love to, I think this is kind of one of those that really does reward longtime fans, because it is the sort of stuff that if you are a fan of and sort of a comic book friend of Matt Murdock, watching him pull off this sort of crap is exactly what you love about Daredevil.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
And it's got that hook where not only is he overcoming his disadvantage and his handicap of being blind by being able to read everyone at the table, but it's that classic Stan Lee Daredevil twist where it's actually the fact that he does have the disability, that he is blind, that in the end makes him so powerful against the guy that otherwise would be able to beat anybody. It's the old, somebody shining the flashlight in his eyes.
Yep, exactly.
And it doesn't affect him at all. So I really loved this story. I thought it was well done, and it does have very much that sort of like 70s or 80s casino movie kind of feel to it. Really good stuff.
Yeah, and we're not even done, because after a tense, sweaty match of mental chess, Matt wins the tournament, and the chips themselves don't matter. In fact, the check is written out to that Lavasseur name, and he can't cash it, so he's just out the money that he put in order to even get into the tournament. But the big deal is the victory grants him access to the restricted penthouse floor so that he has an opportunity to go after that attaché case. The real game now has just begun. It's under heavy guard, but Matt's brought a backup in the form of a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. And that's when book one ends. Book two comes in, and we get this classic Daredevil and Spider-Man energy from... They've had a number of team-ups throughout the years. Plenty of banter, friction that is half admiration, half annoyance, and combat that just all over the place. The two heroes cut their way through the triad security that is on the floor, only to have that attaché case slip through their fingers in all the chaos. Fortunately, Spider-Man manages to tag it with a tracer, and they can follow it as the duo then races from Macau to Shanghai in order to get this attaché case. Spider-Man eventually gets his hands on the case, but when Daredevil catches up to him after the fact and asks for it, Spider-Man hesitates. And instead, he first wants to know what's in the case. And this is where I think the story really gets interesting. Because of the mind wipe that erased Daredevil's secret identity from the world, Peter no longer remembers Matt Murdock as Daredevil. The trust, the years of partnership, the shared victories, they're all gone. Mm-hmm. Peter's left with a Daredevil he thinks he knows, but no longer truly recognizes. So Matt comes clean. The reason you feel there's a hole in your memory is because there is. Everyone used to know my identity, and I didn't, and I did something to change that. I'm still the man you trusted. The only difference is now you don't know my name. And he goes on to share what's in the case. Information about Black Cat's competitors in the New York criminal underworld. Spider-Man hears all this. He ends up giving Daredevil the case, and as he leaves, he says, "Watch out for those black costume phases. They could really do a number on you." I just loved the last 4 pages of this book because, it's like team ups and partnerships work because you know and you trust the person you're with, and it's because of those shared experiences. And now there's just this piece missing. And so he goes to hand it to him and he's like, wait a minute. There's my spidey senses tingling. This doesn't make sense. I know you, but yet I don't know you. And I absolutely loved the fact that there are repercussions to having everyone forget that Matt Murdock is Daredevil. And we actually see a ramification for that in this story.
Mm-hmm. Without yet knowing at this point, if you're reading along, what exactly it was he did. But increasingly, Soule is just sort of unpacking the fact that, Foggy still knows, and he's the only one. And
then we don't know why that is either.
Yep, but now we know that Daredevil was the one who caused this. So it didn't happen to him. He actually caused it. And it's little by little you start to find out what's going on, and before the big reveal actually comes. And there's still people missing. At this point, we're 10 books in, and where exactly is the woman he was supposedly in love with at the end of the previous volume?
Kirsten McDuffie, she's presumably still in San Francisco, but we don't know. I loved the story because of the start of the story, and I loved it even more because of the end of the story. I think it is a testament to Soule that you have this one thing, you have this story, this really good story that feels like a lot of stories that we've had for Daredevil over the years. But then he sort of, these are questions I've had. I'm like, how did he do this? How did this happen? How did the rabbit get put back in the hat? It doesn't make any sense to me. And this is the very first time in Volume 5 he acknowledges that, hey, something's happened here, and we still don't know what it is. But this is the new normal, and I did something to cause it to happen.
Yep, exactly.
So to me, this felt very much like an old school team up book. I love it. I love that actions have consequences, and the fact that I loved the fact that we finally got some acknowledgement to just how different things are now versus where they were at the end of the last volume. And I was just sort of waiting for that acknowledgement, and then it finally happened.
Awesome. That's very cool. Yeah, these were fun stories. I liked them. I liked the art. I liked the femme fatale that wanders along with him for a while there. So he's got his little, there's the James Bond thing where you've got to have the beautiful girl in the casino and this sort of stuff. So it was very much a story that, you kind of knew what they were doing, but you go along with it because it was fun, and because when you put Daredevil in as James Bond, things change and it becomes more interesting. So,
yeah.
All right, Dwayne. Daredevil rapid fire questions, just like we always have. I'm going to be, like I said, adding one on to the end. But let's start out. Who's Matt Murdock in love with this year?
So there's no real love interest this year so far. There's a brief mention of Kirsten, and I think they just basically said she's still in San Francisco. But that is about the extent of it. That's all we know.
Yep. Biggest villain of the year?
10 Fingers at the start of the year. But obviously we had some other stories, but no real villains per se. But obviously that dark art story that has started will give us another really good option for next year.
Yeah, I would say 10 Fingers for this year with the idea that the other guy is going to take over for 2017's top spot.
Yeah.
Did we see Matt practicing law this year?
He is. He's back in the courtroom, though, like, he actually gets a defeat this year because, like, he is trying to indict 10 Fingers after 10 Fingers gets brought in, and it doesn't go well. And he, in fact, ends up getting on the, he ends up getting the, like, basement office from the district attorney because he wasn't able to get the indictment to stick.
Well, somebody gets to his witness. Things go bad. Anyone knew No Matt's identity?
So it's crazy. No one seems to know Matt Murdock is Daredevil except Foggy Nelson. And the other thing is Foggy Nelson is not on Matt Murdock is not on Foggy Nelson's Christmas list right now. They are not on very good speaking terms, it would seem. There was, I think, one interaction that they had in these first dozen books or so, and it's very contentious.
No, absolutely. It's kind of odd, and obviously there's going to be other people now who will start learning it. I doubt that along with his other changes that Daredevil is necessarily, unless somehow he's not only found a way to put his genie back in the bottle, but to become better at keeping a secret than he used to be. Probably it's going to start leaking out all over again. We'll see.
I sort of feel like this is, not a question of if, but a question of when people are going to start figuring it out again.
So is Daredevil a good guy this year?
I think so. He seems to be trying to do the right thing for the right reasons, and at least at the start of the year. And so we'll see if this continues.
All right. New equipment or outfit at all?
Completely new costume. The red and black. More black than red, I guess.
Nope. And it's not like the what was his name? Chisington. And it's not like the Chichester run where he had kind of that armored, almost Punisher kind of black. This is more just like his regular costume, only with the colors inverted. So
yes.
Learn anything new about Matt's past this year?
I didn't note anything about Matt's past this year. Obviously, there's stuff hinted that we hopefully are going to find out about, like something in his past presumably has happened that caused everyone to forget who he is and what his secret identity is, but we don't know what that is as of yet.
No. The world's learned lots less about his past in the last year somehow.
Yes.
And what's the biggest moment of the year for you for Daredevil?
I think I just have it, just Daredevil's new start. Like, just the whole change. Like, when you see Daredevil kind of for the first time here, and it just sort of is supposed to be taken as like the new normal, it just seemed huge because like there was so much different about where it was versus where it is versus where it was.
Just the complete sort of cut over of it all.
Yeah.
Because really, I would say there weren't, other than that, like big individual moments as much. There were little moments that all kind of added up to things and stuff like that.
Yes.
So, all right. And then my last question, and we might be able to do this every year or two now. We just finished Volume 4. You've now read the first part of Volume 5. Did you enjoy the end of Volume 4 or the start of Volume 5 more? Just off the top of your head, if you had to rate them.
I think I enjoyed the end of Volume 4 more than I liked the start of Volume 5, but I really liked the start of Volume 5. And this is also, if I'm going to be honest, a little bit of cheating because I know where we're going with Volume 5, and I like the stuff that we're getting into even more than the stuff I already saw for Volume 5. Okay. So it only gets better from here, I guess is what I'm saying.
All right. I definitely like Volume 4 more. I'm surprised. It seemed like you would maybe just come out and say 5 was better than 4 already, but 4 was pretty strong.
Strong. I would not go there yet. Like, based on what... Like, I really liked Blind Man's Bluff, and I liked the Ten Fingers story arc. Those were both good, but the end of Volume 4 was better than that. But there's going to be some pretty stiff competition coming over the next couple of years.
All right. Sounds good.
All right, Dan, I think that wraps up our discussion on Daredevil. I think we got one more piece of business. We're going to talk a takeaway for 2016. This week's takeaway. All right, Dan, so the takeaway is going to be a little bit different. We're going to, since we're not looking at kind of the full breadth and scope of comics and Marvel like we've been doing in previous years, we're going to just focus on like one little piece that sort of is important for 2016, and I think for that it might be this big reboot that Marvel did, right?
Yeah, and it's the Marvel reboot and the DC reboot all kind of are in one big idea this year. That as the comics, I think, are getting more and more of sort of available to larger popular culture through the movies and the like, both Marvel and DC are concerned about simplifying and sort of cleaning up their continuity and their storylines and getting new characters in that look more like the 21st century. Getting things into a spot, essentially, where they can open the doors to all these people they see watching the movies and say, hey, we've got a comic universe too, and it's pretty cool. Come on in. You don't need to know 40 years of history. You can just start here. And so they rebooted, and the Marvel reboot was very successful. The DC reboot was very successful. Obviously, there were some stumbling blocks, like the whole Captain America thing. They're going to take care of that in a little while, and sort of, obviously there were people incensed about it, but they do take care of it and realize just what a mistake they made and kind of clean that up. What is interesting is that through all of this, you have, like Daredevil has kind of a dark turn, but we go back to really basics in many cases. This is a Daredevil who's protecting his area. It's him and Foggy. There is, everything's back in Hell's Kitchen. We've got kind of almost like a Frank Miller sort of feel. So what a lot of the comics are doing is going back to that place where people love them most, So DC is trying to get back to more of almost like that feel that they had back in the day, where they bring back Wally West. They've already brought back Hal Jordan and Barry Allen and all of these guys. Marvel is now rebooting and reestablishing a lot of parts of their line as well. They've brought back the Ultimate Universe, and they're doing some things with it. They've brought back a bunch of other characters who'd been maybe out of areas for a while. You're seeing that reboot going on in Moon Knight right now. We're seeing it in Daredevil. And it's just sort of like everything's possible right now. What we're seeing in Daredevil is actually kind of crazy. That they just basically started a new series and nothing makes sense. But the advantage is that nothing makes sense anywhere in the Marvel Universe right now. And so you can kind of get by with that. There's a series going on. It's called Ultimates 2 that's going on in 2016 that I just read, which is a bridge to sort of new Ultimate Universe stuff. Where you have like massive conceptual entities like Eternity and all of these others fighting against some of these and dealing with stuff. It's a really crazy time. But They're bringing in new characters. They're trying new things like that Vision miniseries and the like. And it's really an exciting time in comics. So I think the main thing is, again, they've realized that they need to do something to be able to sort of transition to the next century of comics. And they're just working on figuring out how to do that. And so, yeah. What do you think of the way they're doing it with Daredevil?
So the thing the thing I find interesting is the thing I'm wondering about is this is a really dark sort of turn, I think, for Daredevil compared to where we were at the end of volume 3 and into volume 4. And like, did all of them end up being like this, or were
Not
there
even
still
remotely.
other bright spots?
There's a lot of them that take very bright turns. They've got newer futures. Black Panther goes in, he's back as king, but he's got a lot of things going on, and even sort of that question of what's up with a hereditary monarchy in the 21st century. How's that still work, right? But a lot of the books that I'm reading, you've got the Unbeatable Squirrel Girl. You've got a lot of other Marvel books with some of their younger heroes, Hawkeye and the Pizza Dog stuff, and a lot of these that are still continuing on, where really they're just allowing them, like I say, to go back to their natural state. X-Men is just a mess, because X-Men's always a mess.
Sure.
Iron Man, with now Riri Williams, you're going back to the idea of the Iron Man character as a super genius sort of young person, right? Now it's a black girl instead of being Tony Stark. Creating the armor and sort of trying to improve the armor and all this other stuff. Iron Man for so long now has been just the rich industrialist that you don't really get a lot of that joy of discovery stuff that was there back in the day. So they're trying to reset that. Miles Morales is brought into the universe. Gwen Stacy is brought into the universe. You have all this new stuff and younger characters and the like. So there is a lot of bright in the Marvel universe right now too.
Okay. I wonder what it says about me that this is the stuff that seems to be really resonating with me. Like, I don't know. It feels weird to me that, like, in talking with you about Mark Waid and Chris Samney and the end of Volume 4 and how much you liked that, and you just, again, proclaimed that you liked it better than the start of Volume 5, I still felt myself gravitating towards this dark, kind of gritty look and kind of the mood and the voice and everything that's sort of going on, and a protege that's getting injured on pretty much every other book, it felt like, and it just, like, I don't know, it just seems weird to me that, like, why do I like this so much, I guess is my question. And it's not a good question to ask you because you're not going to know necessarily.
Well, I will say this, though, that if you didn't like this sort of stuff, we wouldn't be reading Daredevil. Because it was the Daredevil TV series in many cases that sort of got you interested in Daredevil in the first place.
That is true.
He gets the crap beaten out of him all the time, and this is very, this is very much like, in many ways, the Daredevil TV show. It's also very much like some of the other stuff. I would say that most Daredevil fans like this style of Daredevil better than the Wade Samney style of Daredevil. They might not like, in actual fact, I think for me, it's the coloring and some of the stuff like that makes me not like parts of this as much. I just don't like it when they wash out all the colors as much as this did. Sure. It's almost like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles book from back in the day where they only had one color. So you had black, white, and green, or you had black, white, and red, or something, right?
Right.
I don't think they took full advantage of some of the abilities of the medium. But that doesn't mean that the story wasn't fantastic, and that this isn't the kind of story you'd expect. I remember back in the days stating that it seemed like the more ninjas there were, the happier you were with the Daredevil book. And it seems like that's the case, because here we are.
To a point.
Ninjas everywhere. And
there is a law of diminishing returns there at some point, where it gets to be a bit much, and it did get to be a bit much at points. But no, I think your point stands there, where this very much feels like the Netflix series, like in comic book form, and that excites me a lot. And I'm like really interested in seeing where this goes from here, and very, very, very excited about this, because it does. Yeah, this feels like Daredevil to me, even though now I have a lot more Daredevil to reference.
For most people, I would say they would think of Wade Samney as a palate cleanser, but not necessarily as, their preferred regular meal or drink with Daredevil, right? That the reason why the Wade run worked so well was that we had just had so much dark for so long, and it had gotten, volume 2 had gotten so depressing that just having something where it sort of lightens up, especially after volume 2 and 3, is just, I think it worked well. But that's not Daredevil's place. That's not where he belongs. He belongs in a Hell's Kitchen at night, fighting sort of, hand-to-hand combat. And that's where we're back to.
And a healthy dose of Wilson Fisk, probably at some point, I imagine.
Never seems to be too long. So, yep.
No. All right. I think that is going to do it for us for this week. We'd like to thank you all for joining us. If you're new to the podcast, please consider subscribing on your podcast player of choice. That way you'll get each new episode as soon as it's released. If you've already subscribed, we'd appreciate if you'd share the show via social media or leave us a review. That'll help other new listeners find the show that much easier. Now, whether you're new to the podcast or you've been with us from the beginning, we'd love to get your thoughts on this week's show. As Dan stated, we're trying a little bit of a hybrid version of the format compared to where we were way back when, and where we eventually went to the 2 weeks to cover a year. We'd love to get your thoughts on this. Was it too much? Was it too little? Let us know. You can send us those comments via email. That address is comments@comicsovertime.com, or you can reach out to us on Blue Sky. We are at Comics Overtime there. Dan, we got through 12 books of Volume 5. We have a new villain who's doing blood murals.
Yep.
I think it's only going to get more dark from here.
Oh, it definitely is going to get more dark from here. Yeah. I remember that. I have to review some things, but I do remember that. So, there we go.
All right. Until next week in 2017, take care, everybody.
See you later, folks.